Hello. I have a few books to talk about that I've dipped into. And so I've read a few books since my last library pickup, and then I've just picked up a couple books that I don't know, I just had an urge to read that I own. Actually, just one book, just one book of mine that I own. That is The Awakening by Kate Chopin. An American writer. This was published in 1899. She began writing after her husband died. She had 6 children. So one thing I want to say about this right off the bat, that I didn't know anything about this book other than it's talked about as being like early feminist, radical. But I read like the first couple sentences of the back, spoiler. So, and it's also talked about in the foreword, which I normally skip anyway. But, so if you want to go in not knowing very much, don't read anything. Just dip in, because it's under 100 pages. It might even be under 95 pages. And whether you know what happens or not, it's not really a plot-driven book. It is about the interior experience of the main character, whose name I'm forgetting. What is her name? Edna. But, so I'll say a couple things. Number one, masterclass in short story. A sense of place is established without being overwritten. The book is infused with where it takes place, which is like this island, this summer island outside of New Orleans. The characters are kind of well drawn. They're drawn. But you just know what you need to know is Kate Chopin's attitude, I think. And it's really the interior experience, except she doesn't really give us much explanation. I think women reading this book at the time would have felt a sense of restriction. And I think for a lot of women, this would have caused them to go mad. And it drove Edna to do certain things. And those things were considered very radical. They were antisocial. Some of these things that she began to do. And so people reading this book were scandalized, and it was banned from everywhere. So I enjoyed the sense of place. I really liked what she did with, and also how she expressed the interior experience of Edna. If it's not Edna, that's who I'm saying as the main character. How she expressed Edna's experience and how she drops in different characters to further express Edna's what she's going through. Brilliant. I'd love to talk and chat with the people that have read this book more in the comments, because it was such an experience. I just gobbled it up, but I slowed myself down because I wanted to enjoy it, and I was enjoying it so much I was reading it too fast. So I highly recommend. The other one I finished is Antonio White's Frost in May. This is a boarding school novel in a Catholic, do I need to say Catholic convent? In a convent school that the main character, Ferdinand, she's called Nanda, is sent to when she's young, as girls sometimes were in these times. I think this was written in, I'm gonna say, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, the 1930s? This is the story of Nanda, who gets sent to the school, and it's her journey, her interior journey through getting to the school, feeling its restrictions, disliking the nuns, trying to fit in, and then fitting in over time, and how her attitude changes about religion, about becoming a Catholic, because her family were Protestants, and that was brought up a lot in the beginning by the nuns. And she just embraces the Catholic beliefs that she is surrounded by and that are infused in her day. There's an event that happens near the end. She's just about to make some life decisions. A series of events happen that I loved not knowing anything about. I would definitely seek out another Antonia White. I felt like I was in the story and I wanted to know what happens with Nanda. I cared about her, and really nice summer, anytime read, but summer read, because it's got enough grit to it. It's got enough storyline, but it's not too heavy. Super enjoyable. I guess there's a reason why it's a classic. The other thing I finished was The Adult. This is a new release, and it is Bronwyn Fischer's first novel, which you don't know what you're getting into when you read a debut novel, right? So, I mean, I actually tabbed a couple pages that, because I thought the writing is, I thought, spectacular in this book. This is not a boarding school novel, but it is a novel about a university. It's in a university setting, and the main character is a college student, and it's her first year in college. She's going to the university in Toronto, leaving a small town. I guess in this university, she gets a single room, or it's a single room in a quad room, something like that, but she has her own space. She feels very much an outsider. She comes from a very small town, and she's feeling that when she gets to this big city university, and she's trying to make friends. She hears about this professor of poetry, and I think the professor's name is Rachel, and how Rachel might have had, this adult professor might have had relationships with a student, a girl last year. Maybe this is something that she's been known to do. So that's rumbling around. And Natalie runs into, just completely randomly, runs into this woman in the park named Nora. Nora comes up to her, sits down, introduces herself, and there's some kind of energy, some kind of connection, and there's a reason that they exchange information. I can't remember how they connect after that, but they do. Goes from there. Nora has been married to another woman, and she's divorced. And they begin a friendship. There's a lot of sexual energy there and tension, and the story goes on from there. I didn't know anything about this. This is one of those books that I only read like the first paragraph, and I didn't read anything more. It's kind of thriller-like, because you think, where's this going? What's going to happen? Is college student Natalie going to get in too deep? Is she going to get her heart broken? What's up? Why is Nora randomly meeting her on a park bench? So many questions. I just was so compelled to keep reading. And let me see what I marked here. Oh yeah, I loved this passage on page 186, but I don't want to read it now because I don't want to reveal anything. So the same thing with page 154. So I enjoyed those pages, but I don't want to reveal anything. I'm just saying, it's such a delight when you run across a debut novel and it hooks you. Such a good experience. So I highly recommend this. I'm trying to think of what I would compare it to. I have started in on I Am Homeless, If This Is Not My Home by Lori Moore. This is like 3 different vignettes that I've identified so far. 3 different scenarios. And then I think the book goes on to just keep picking up those people's stories. I don't know yet, because now I've just gotten through like the initial stories. I didn't think that, I thought it was just going to be short stories all the way through, but then I must have turned the page and the next chapter goes back into someone's vignette that we've already met. So early days, I can't say anything more than that. I haven't felt as compelled to keep picking this up, so we'll see. And something that I'm reading and taking very slow, I am forcing myself to take this very slow, is Amina Cain's A House at Night on Writing. This is a book about reflections on writing, but more so reflections on authors and what Amina Cain likes in writing. What kind of writing does she like? What kind of fiction? And she talks about the fact that she loves diaries. She's reading Virginia Woolf's diaries. Let me see what I tagged here, because I mean, I'd have tags all over this book. Something I really related to was, for better or worse, I have always combined one place with another, lived in one landscape while dreaming of a second. It used to be the desert I constantly imagined and wrote about when I lived in Chicago. Sometimes it still is. The desert isn't blank, and neither is the ocean, but in their vastness, they are relaxing as if they were. I mean, I am so crazy about prairie land, desert. Whenever we've been in Colorado, we're usually in the mountains, but we stay in Boulder or an area like that, and we've been mountain biking in some trails, prairie against the mountains, against the Flatirons and in that area. I just feel this possibility, this vastness. There's so many more connections. I mean, not connections, so many more things that I related to in this book, or just something that she's expressing that I think, genius. But the other thing I started that's really interesting is Nevada by Imogen Binney. This is the trans author who wrote this book 10 years ago, and she has added an afterword, which I'm very eager to get to. But this is interesting. She's talking about the main character, Maria, who's trans, and Maria's girlfriend, who's also a trans person named Sophia. This is who her girlfriend is right now. I don't know if that sticks because there's issues there. But this is like the closest first-person narrative I think I've ever read. It's so interesting the way that she writes. It's crazy. It's so cool. So she goes to a movie, Maria. It's hot outside. She has time to kill. She's going into a movie. She takes a can of beer. It ends up being kind of a stupid movie, but when we go see monster movies, we're looking for stupid. And then she goes on from there, but that's just an example of the narrator, the very omniscient narrator saying, well, when we go to monster movies, we're expecting stupid. You are just so close to Maria, but this is a story told by a third-person narrative. I just am so intrigued by this kind of writing. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Nevada, very early on in the book. That's it for now. I might catch up with you again during that library trip. We'll see. Hi there. I'm at the library. I decided to come today, Saturday, rather than wait until Sunday. I like to come on Sundays if I can because parking is free. Parking's only it's only going to cost me like $1.85 when I do pay for parking because it's street parking. But it's not that big of a deal, but I don't know. I like to park for free. I came today because it's nice out and tomorrow it's going to rain. Often I'll go to the library when it's raining because it means that I'm not doing other things in the summer outside that I could be doing. But I got everything done that I wanted to do. Now it's afternoon. Anywho, I just wanted to say before I go in, I'm I didn't keep on reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It just wasn't the Moshvegh for me. I'm not, I will be looking for her other books and checking them out over time. And it's not because I was quick to think to myself, I just didn't care about the main character, but that's not enough to make me put down a book, because there's plenty of books that I've enjoyed where I didn't really care about the characters. It doesn't happen that often, but that's not a requirement. I was just thinking about this when I was out doing yard work. I was thinking about David Foster Wallace, Infinite Jest. I can't say that I cared about any of the characters in that book, but I was compelled to keep reading. It was really the writing. I wanted to just keep experiencing David Foster Wallace's writing in that book. That's a whole other conversation that we can have some other time. If anybody wants to have it, let me know. I am not an expert. I am not 2 feet in. I do want to read some of his other shorter, much shorter stuff. I will some point in my lifetime, but I just won't ever forget the experience of reading that book, especially the opening scene of that book. I read it like 3 times. It was so enjoyable to read, but it wasn't a perfect book for me. Whole other conversation. Anyway, so yeah, just wanted to mention that because I will find another one, try another one. Let's see what I get at the library. I have a few holds, and then I have a couple things I'm going to be looking for, which is always dangerous for me to just go wandering in the stacks, especially when I have holds. We'll see what happens. Hi there. I am not in my car because when I came back from the library and came to my car, there was a bunch of people around because I park right across from a very large church, and they had something going on, I think, and lots of people coming out afterwards. It just wasn't the right atmosphere for me to think about what I picked up. Not only what I picked up, though, remember I said I was going to be perusing the shelves for a couple authors, and that's one of the most fun things to do in a library, isn't it? I wanted to give an update on A Horse at Night, on writing this nonfiction book by Amina Cain. I mentioned in that other clip that one of my favorite parts, these are like little essays, that Amina Cain talks about is how much she enjoys Lolly Willows, a book that I think I talked about here a few videos back, or a handful of videos back. I just read it this year. It's by Sylvia Townsend Warner. And one of the scenes in that book is Lolly's transformation. It's like this thing in her brain opens up, and she knows what she needs to do with the rest of her life. And she talks about it in here. It was just so fun to run across. But it starts on page 90 and goes to page 91 for those of you that will get to this book. So while I was in the G's, I was searching out a Mary Gaitskill book. I wanted to read a Mary Gaitskill. I don't think it mattered which one, because I do have one on hold that's coming to me, but I was just curious which other ones she has. But while I was in the Gaitskill section, this is the serendipitous part, I stumbled on Neil Gaiman, who's a sci-fi fantasy writer that I wanted to try this year. I don't read that genre at all, but I did when I was young. And if a story is based in reality but's got some magical realism, I guess. If there was one Neil Gaiman that I had vaguely heard about that I wanted to read because I thought it fits the bill of being set in a realistic world, but it's got some magical elements, is The Ocean at the End of the Lane.
I did not read The Flap. I just wanted to start reading it. And now I'm halfway in and I'm hooked. It's, first of all, I love the way that Neil Gaiman has started us off in present day. He's attending a funeral as a grown-up back in his hometown. He drives his car back to, he doesn't even know where, he's just killing time before the reception afterwards. And he finds himself driving to his childhood home. And then you are dropped into his 7-year-old self. He's going back in time. We are taken back there with him. It sets the stage. We are introduced to his world as a 7-year-old, his parents, and so on. And somebody who meets up the lane at a farmhouse, and the circumstances by which he meets that other girl, who is slightly older than him. You go forward a little bit, and then you go back again to this 7-year-old boy's adventures at the time. So that's where I'm at now. That's all I can say. I'm really enjoying it. I'm so glad that I took a chance and decided to dip into something that wouldn't be my natural thing. But anyway, getting back to Mary Gaitskill, I picked up This Is Pleasure. This is a book that was written a few years ago. I think it was in 2020. Tiny little thing. I love the way this is written, how Mary Gaitskill put this together. This is right at the Me Too movement era. And this is a story about a guy named Quinn who's in the publishing industry. I think this is supposed to loosely be based on a true story, but I don't know who she's talking about. And it's told from the perspective of Quinn. Every time you come across a page that starts with Q, then it's Quinn, and then his friend, Margot. And so Margot's perspective begins with an M, and then Q's perspective, Quinn's perspective, is Q, and you're dropped into a time period in which he's been, I think criminal charges have been brought against him, or civil charges about his behavior and his, I don't know if it's actual sexual assault that's being charged, but certainly inappropriate behavior. I read this thing so fast. It was so compelling. I loved it.
Editing Renee here. I should have said why I enjoyed this book so much. In such a small space, Mary Gaitskill tackles this complex subject of many perspectives on someone's relationship with a person that becomes the target of these types of allegations. Margot is a friend of Quinn who has felt like Quinn has been inappropriate to others, but has never experienced it herself. Complicated subject done in, I felt, a really interesting way.
I'm writing chops for sure. And I don't know how I heard about Celia Fremlin, but I was also in the stacks to pick up a book of hers. Again, I didn't know which one to pick up, so this was there. It's called The Parasite Person, and it was written in the 80s. Isn't that a great cover? And it is from the perspective of a guy, Martin Lockwood, who's 40. He's a social scientist. He's left his wife because he wanted to be with his mistress, Helen. So we already don't like him. And he's conducting some research. And so he's talking to people that have tried to commit suicide, and they're in a hospital for a short stay. And he comes across this woman named Ruth Ledbetter, a young woman who he interviews. I don't have any idea, because in this part that I'm in, he's interviewed her and now life goes on. I don't know what happens after that, but Ruth Ledbetter plays a part in this book. Who is the parasite person? That's what I want to find out. I'm loving this writing. I don't know a whole lot about Celia Fremlin, and I don't know where I heard her name, but I'm going to find out a lot more and share that with you once I'm done with that, another shorter book. And then, again, the final reason I was in the stacks is to pick up a Kate Walbert, a name that came up somewhere in the book ether, the book world. But I wanted to explore Kate Walbert, and I found this book called His Favorites. This is such a weird premise for a book, a short one. Again, this came out in 2018, I think. This is about 3 teenage girls, and they are drunk, get in a golf cart, start wheeling around a golf course that they crash into at night, and the cart topples over, the friend is killed. She's in a small town, so she leaves town and goes to a prestigious boarding school. And I think this story either starts at that boarding school or starts even after the boarding school. It tells a story of the main character who was the driver of that golf cart. Her name's Jo. That's all I know. I will report back about that. I have 2 more. This one I wanted to, I had a hold on and I picked up. Just released, Foster Dade Explores the Cosmos by Nash Junkins. And I've already dipped in and I've already decided I'm not going to continue. So I wanted to share that with you and explain why. Because first of all, I didn't know at the time that I reserved this book that Nash Junkins, this was his debut novel. And then I probably saw this book either in the New York Times or the New Yorker, and I went back and read the review, and I'm mad now that I can't remember which one, but I'm going to say the New York Times. And the description is really what hooked me. It's a boarding school novel. This is like the summer of boarding school novels, and I am not doing that intentionally. It's so weird when that happens, doesn't it? When you start picking up a theme. But this is such an interesting premise. I only wish it wasn't 600, 500 pages long. So this is a story of Foster Dade, who was a guy that was expelled from a prestigious boys' boarding school, or a boarding school, I should say. It wasn't a boys' boarding school, I don't think. And he arrives there, he's an outsider, and he becomes friends with Annabeth and Jack, who are the twin centers of this boarding school. And 18 months later, he gets expelled following a tragedy that leaves Kennedy, the boarding school, irreparably changed. When our nameless narrator comes to the school years later, he ends up unknowingly in Foster Dade's old dorm room. And he finds a couple things hidden in the wall and whatever. And he becomes, I'll call it obsessed, with investigating what happened, because there weren't many details about what happened, I'm assuming. And so he starts this blog spot, and it's got that kind of thing on the page. And you see some reports in here that are Foster Dade's MacBook Pro music iTunes playlist early spring. Just all kinds of artifacts that sound interesting. I didn't realize how big this book was, and I didn't love the voice and the writing from the beginning. So I'm going to put this aside for now. I felt like if I wanted to read a beast of a book that's a boarding school novel about teenagers, I would go back to reading The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis, which I started a few months ago and didn't finish. But I could easily go back to that book and drop right back in. I loved the writing. I loved the characters. And it's too long, I think. But that's Bret Easton Ellis. He's going to do what he does. I love that it's set in the 80s. This is set in pretty present day. This is something that happened back in 2008. But I want to hear from anyone who has this on their radar or who has already picked it up and is reading it. The last one is a hold that I picked up called To Name the Bigger Lie. It's a nonfiction. It's a memoir by Sarah Viren. It's called A Memoir in Two Stories. And I've already dipped into this and I'm loving it so far. It's very early days. I'm only like 30 pages in. But Sarah Viren starts to research. She starts a book researching her high school philosophy teacher, a man who taught his students to question everything. At the same time she's starting this research, her partner, Marta, is the
target of accusations against her, having to do with, I think, it says, Marta's life is derailed by a series of mysterious and frightening accusations at the university. And so through her research of this philosophy teacher who had taught her to question everything and ultimately the reality of historical atrocities, their life is derailed by this thing that's going on. And this book, and also just Sarah through her writing, explore the powerful pull of dangerous conspiracy theories and the pliability of personal narratives in a world dominated by hoaxes and fakes. That just sounds so interesting. What can I say? It's early days. I will report back. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it. Oh, I should say where I'm sitting. So I'm sitting in the living room that's got the red and white sofa and bookshelves and the fireplace. And behind me is a picture of our beloved Elle, who was our cat for a very long time and lived a very long life and passed away last year. And then her ashes are in that beautiful box. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it. I have absolutely loved the comments and the feedback and the discussion that's going on in our in the Jane Austen vlog that I posted. One of the reasons that I came to BookTube is exactly what's happening, which is this beautiful discourse about books and the sharing of experiences and the sharing of recommendations and just feedback in general. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you on the next one.